if you would stand as you are willing and able, we are going to sing something from the Teal hymnal today, 1008. When your heart is in a holy place. And some of you may want to your heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, creed, and kind. Wow. And we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy, that's hers, I guess. Heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then, oh, we did it again. One more time. It's a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of a sacred space, and the God of our hearts stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's, then our heart is in a holy place. It's in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, it's in a holy place. I'm going to say something. Would you please be seated? So, Kevin Smith and I are co-leading the introduction to the service, and we're trying to advertise how much fun it is by being up here laughing through half of the hymn. But we want you to be in on the secret. So the secret that causes the laughter is on at the very end of the song. When Diana gets to play those bottom notes, we're supposed to take a pause. And we didn't. We just kept rushing on. So the nice thing about singing with people that you care about and that have heard you before and will hear you again is that you can interweave humor into your choral presentation. And that's what we're going to do today.
I wasn't intending to play the role here. The future role. Anyways, good morning. And welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Farmington. My name's Kevin Smith, and I'm part of the executive committee and serving as the vice president of finance right now. And since I've got the pulpit for just a sec, I want to remind everyone, as you already know, we're in the middle of our stewardship campaign, and all the information is fanned out to you. You either picked it up in church or hopefully received it in the mail. And I ask you folks to get out your pledge forms, fill them out, and get them in as quickly as possible. Don't wait for the end of the month. The executive board really needs to know what the numbers are so that we could prepare a balanced budget for presentation in May. So it's really important to know what we've got to work with so that we can make our plans for the church year. So I'd also like to extend a special welcome to any visitors that we have here today. Please join us in the lower level after the service for coffee and bagels. Newcomers might enjoy introductory conversations at the welcome table. Someone from our membership committee will be hanging around nearby to help with that. And also during service, we have supervised nursery for babies and toddlers and religious education classes for children and youth. Please see a religious education coordinator, who I don't believe Natalie's in here, Natalie Case, for more information. If you need to see Natalie, the ushers can help connect you there. And should you need to leave the service for any reason, there are 2 other locations in the building where the service is broadcast, and an usher can point you in that direction too if you need that. So our UU principles begin with our pledge to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. As we are a welcoming congregation, we welcome into our community people of all races, sexual orientations, belief systems, and ages, including any who are fidgety and create youthful noises. These folks represent our future. They're fully welcome here in our meeting house during our service.
Oh, cool.
Should I go through it? No. I mean, here. Up to you if you want. This way? I can't sit front. No? Better? Okay. I did.
There are a couple of announcements I have here this morning. One is that a few more volunteers are still needed to help with the religious education during the months of April and May. If you're able to do that, and you can be flexible, it doesn't have to be the whole time. If you have even a Sunday or two available, please see Natalie Case during coffee hour to sign up. Also, we have an upcoming New UU information discussion. So if you're a visitor that's been coming here a while and considering becoming a member here at UUCF, the membership committee will be sponsoring what we call a New UU discussion. It'll be Sunday, April 14th. After the service for a couple hours, it's a chance to get information, get a little bit of the history of the church, a little more on UU organization and religion, and answer any questions that you might have. So there's a sign-up sheet down in Adams Hall, or you can see me if you're interested in attending that. Are there any other announcements? Those are the only two. Oh, okay.
I'm really pleased to have my dear friend Xiaodong Wei here today to play erhu, the Chinese two-string violin, and someone I know from her new school, Clare Academy.
Okay, I also ask you to check your order of service for other announcements that are printed there. So now can you please join me in reading the chalice lighting that is in your order of service? We light our chalice to the power of our lives as the flame guides our way. As life is like a game of cards, we know that the hand that is dealt you represents determinism. The way you play it is free will. May our free will be open to application of compassion and justice toward the wider community.
Albert Einstein wrote these words: "A human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, one's thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of their own consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task then must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and to the whole of nature in its beauty." If you would please turn to 212 and stand as you are willing and able, and we're going to sing "We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle." All 5 verses. Yeah, dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. Sisters, brothers, all here. sisters, brothers, all. On and on the circles moving, on and on the circles moving, on and on the circles moving, sisters, brothers, all. So please stay standing. When I was growing up, my best friend was Church of Christ. She practiced the religion Church of Christ. And it was so wonderful when you would hear the elders or the adults talking about each other. They'd say, well, Sister Tony has the nicest green blouse on today. And Brother Dave, I can't believe how he painted the front bench this week. And so you are all sisters, brothers, all. And what a perfect opportunity for you to say good morning to one another. And for those people that are seated, you can stay seated and people will move around, and maybe you might even say hi to somebody you haven't met yet. So take a couple minutes and say good morning to the sisters and brothers. It just seemed like the appropriate thing to do.
Okay, can you please now join me in reading the litany in your order of service? Cherish your doubts, for doubt is the intendant of truth. Doubt is the key to the door of knowledge. It is the servant of discovery. A belief which may not be questioned binds us to error, for there is incompleteness and imperfection in every belief. Doubt is the touchstone of faith. It is an acid which eats away the false. Let no one fear the truth, that doubt may consume it, for doubt is a testing of belief. Truth stands boldly and unafraid. It is not shaken by the testing. For truth, if it be truth, arises from each testing stronger, more secure. Those that would silence doubt are filled with fear. Their houses are built on shifting sand. But those who fear not doubt and know its use are founded on rock. They shall walk in the light of growing knowledge. The work of their hands shall endure. Therefore, let us not fear doubt, but let us rejoice in its help. It is to be wise as a staff to the blind. Doubt is the attendant of truth. Now this morning, and many of you may have seen the email blast that went out, we have a special collection. I believe there's an envelope in your order of service. And the special collection is for CARES of Farmington Hills, C-A-R-E-S, standing for Community, Action, Resources, Empowerment Services. And this money, your donations, will go to help fund their food and clothing pantry that serves both the Farmington and surrounding communities. So please join me in reading the unison words of offering. We give generously to support this church where love, justice, and equality inspire our acts of service and compassion. We dedicate these gifts to all that we stand for within the Unitarian Universalist tradition.
As you're invited to step up front and share your first name and a joy or concern, we are reminded by the beautiful music today and the beautiful pauses and recognition that we give silently, that our lives are filled with sounds and then silences and then pauses and a variety of kinds of appreciation. So when we do this, we're allowing all the beauty that is created from this music to wash over us and not be interrupted by anything but little waving fingers in appreciation that is heard by the musicians as very loud applause and standing ovations. I invite you to come up to acknowledge a perfect joy, a perfect love, an imperfect challenge that you may be going through that you would like to draw the congregation's attention to, and I would be happy to light a candle in recognition of those joys and concerns. See, that silence gets to be contagious. Yes, you want to come up? Hi. Good. us that keep practicing on Sundays with just a few moments of silence. So as Bud said, what do we do with this silence? Shall we fill it with the story of birds? Why not? What shall we do with this silence? Shall we allow the voices and messages of our internal spirit and soul speak to us? Why not? What shall we do with this silence? Give gratitude for all the life that we have, no matter how it is described? Yes. What we shall do with this silence is close our eyes and allow this space to hold us, the safety and sanctuary of this space, in a few moments of silence where we can find what our own spirit addresses in our shared silence together. Brother, sister, take our time, go slowly. Listen deep inside yourself. Simple things are holy. Brother, sister, take your time, go slowly. Listen deep inside yourself. Simple things are holy. Brother, sister, take your time, go slowly. Listen deep inside yourself. Simple things are holy. isn't it wonderful to be able to come to listen to a sermon that you were thinking of listening to about the Fool, but also to learn a new instrument. And the name of the instrument is in your order of service on page 2, ERHU, correct? Yeah, it's just beautiful, thank you. So we'll wait for this music to be on a CD, and we'll be the first to buy it from the two of you. So, did you ever know a fool? Did you ever know a fool? Have you ever been a fool? Did you ever think you could learn anything from a fool? That's what we're going to talk about today. So tomorrow is April Fool's Day, and it's just amazing the background information you can get on Wikipedia from April Fool's Day being acknowledged all over the world. In the United Kingdom, an April Fool's joke is revealed by shouting to somebody, "April Fool," at the recipient, who becomes the April Fool. In the study in the 1950s by some folklorists said that they continue to do this practice, but they only practice it until noon. It ceases at noon, which after that time, it's not acceptable to play any more jokes. A person playing a joke after midday is considered an April Fool themselves. So in England, a fool is known by different names. Some of you might know these names. A noodle. I've called people a noodle before. A gob, a gobby, and a noddy. In Ireland, now this is very interesting. The tradition is to entrust the victim with an important letter. So you write an important letter, and I would give it to Paul Bailey, let's say. And it would, have his name on it. And then that person would then I would ask the victim to take it to someone else, and so on. And when the letter is finally opened, it contains the words, "Send the fool further." And so you just keep sending this crazy letter around until somebody gets tired of sending it. Sort of like some of you party poopers on Facebook. When it says, "Please share this and keep it going," you think, "I'm not keeping it going." And then you don't do it. So then you would be the April Fool. In Poland, it's a day of jokes, and this has gone on for centuries. A day when jokes are told, and then you have various hoaxes, and sometimes a joke could be a lie, and it even gets into the media, and then they just cast it off, well, that was an April Fool's joke. I'm not going to go any further with that because sometimes it seems like we have a lot of April Fool's days in any given month, whether it's April or not, in our media and in our families and elsewhere. I do remember when I was 8 years old, I thought that I should switch the sugar and the salt at my house. I was raised by very strict parents that were not very happy to have a teaspoon of salt in their coffee and a spoonful of sugar on their eggs. It was not an enjoyable memory, and many years later, it still isn't. Unitarian Universalists were usually grounded intellectually, placing rational thought and provable ideas as our foundation for assessing the world. Yet many of us do entertain the transpersonal, beyond personal, and we look at mythical stories that can be used to make sense of the world. We can use symbols and metaphors to expand our perceptions beyond just the literal meaning of events. So today we're going to use that metaphor of the fool in honor of April Fool's Day. Many of you are familiar with the hero's journey. In 1949 was when Joseph Campbell was born, died in 1987. He proposed the every great story told, from ancient myths from many, many, many years ago and from places all over the world, onto modern day movies, one can find the same narrative inside every tale. He called that the hero's journey. When we look at the chronological order of the most well-known tarot cards, Major Arcana, a similar story unfolds as well. Christopher Vogler, who worked to bring the hero's journey to a format accessible to all of us, spoke about the depth of that journey. Among the students of myth, Carl Jung, Mircea Eliade, Theodore Gaster, and others, along with the work of Joseph Campbell, they had a particular relevance to our quest. They developed a pathway that gave us a structure based on mythology from around the world and applied in the books The Hero with a Thousand Faces, The Power of Myth, The Inner Reaches of Outer Space, etc. And if anybody wants to borrow my unopened series of Joseph Campbell, if you still have a DVR, is that what they're called? DVD. Anyway, those big boxy things, you could borrow that. The hero's journey is an overarching metaphor about our deep inner journey of transformation. Heroes, yes, this applies to heroes' journeys, but it also applies to your journey, in my opinion, your everyday lives. Because in your everyday life, you could be a hero, and especially over spans of decades. The degree that we interpret the journey depends on, in my opinion, how awake we are. Not how egotistical we are or how humble we are, but how awake we are to our experiences. The lives that we live have deeper meanings, and they can be revealed through a variety of processes, and this, using the Fool and looking at the hero's journey, is one of them. They can cover such ground and great movements of times that we went through big separations, or big descent, or large ordeals, and then the glory of return. In reaction to Campbell's work, a man named George Lucas composed what many have called the myth for our times, Star Wars. This whole series, where the young heroes of a highly technological civilization confront demons and have trials and wonders of the heroes of old, become one of the examples that many of us are familiar with. So there are stages in a hero's life. And the first stage in the tarot card pack is the Fool. And the Fool is depicted with a number 0. So in the journey, it moves on and on, from 0 to, I think, in the teens or even beyond. I'm sure it's beyond. It's into the 20s at least. But this Fool is depicted, as you will see on your front cover, he's depicted as a youth, and he's walking joyfully into the world. He carries nothing with him except that little pack on the stick, and he's excited, and he sees dangers on the path barely. He kind of ignores any dangers on the path. And you'll see that dog kind of biting at his leg. The dog is trying to remind him that there are dangers on the path and be careful. And so if he takes one more step, he might just tumble off the cliff. That doesn't seem to concern him, however, because he's very naive, or maybe he's just simply unaware and focused on being in the delight of the journey. And so sometimes that dog is depicted as a tiger. Sometimes it barks or claws at him in warning. If he doesn't become aware of his surroundings soon, all of his adventures might end, but that isn't his concern. So here is where some of you are already drifting off and saying, why is Reverend Leonetta talking about a tarot card on a Sunday morning? I want coffee and a bagel. And so this is exactly the time where you pull yourself back and you look at your own life and say, I remember when I was the fool. The fool, we think, and it connotates often, is the dumb one or the one that makes stupid mistakes. No, it's the innocent one that is motivated to go forward in the journey, not listening to the dog barking at it or its parents barking at it. Oh, well, if you go off with your friends and you don't have enough money and you don't have your cell phone charger, if you don't have this, something will happen. That person in your life, it might have happened when you were 14 or 16, or it might have happened just last week, or your favorite spouse that's in their 80s might have warned you about something. But it's that person, the dog or the tiger is that person that when you blow up the balloon, you're so happy, and then that dog or the tiger or that person in your life that wants to worry about your every ache and pain and precaution is the one that pops the balloon. So when we look at that fool, it doesn't mean that we were only fools when we were 14 or 16. If you were really lucky, you've been a fool periodically all through your life. Be a fool and enjoy the new beginnings. Be a fool and learn about a new name for an instrument. Be a fool and try to wonder why Reverend Leonetta is waving her unmanicured fingers up in the air instead of giving proper applause. Be a fool and learn something new and have a different perspective. Some of you wait until you're retired and say, I'm going to take an art class now, or I'm going to join a choir now, or I'm going to learn an instrument now. And some of you are such fools that you don't wait until you retire. You turn into early fools, and how wonderful is that? And so the fool has these new beginnings, and all the wants that they have and all their needs are packed in one little satchel on their back. They don't need, the best cell phone and the best camera and the best luggage to go on the trip. They go on the trip. And so that's where I think it starts applying for me. I know a few years ago I thought, I'm tired of traveling. It's just not fun anymore. And I'm kind of a gypsy at heart, but I was just sick of it. All the extra security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have fake knees, so I have to get patted down like I'm a convict, and on and on and on it goes. And a friend who is my age posted on Facebook, never allow the complications of preparing you for the journey to stop you from taking the journey. And so that applies to many of us. And so when we say the journey, do we mean getting to Arizona or getting to Florida? Yes, we can mean the literal journey, but we're talking about the symbolic journey as well. And so sometimes some of us say, for instance, how does it apply practically to the church? Some of us say, we watched those little kids when we were in our 40s. We're done with that. We're too tired. We can't get down on the ground, and they're too energetic. And then you assist in religious education. You realize you don't have to get on the ground. All you have to do is interact with the children for 45 minutes. And even if you're 87 3/4, anybody over 87 3/4 is exempt, but 87 3/4 and below, you still can interact with the children and be a fool again. And so this idea of new beginnings is trying something new. So what happens, because I know some of you, I won't ask you to raise your hands. I'll just ask you to go like this. Raise your eyebrows if you've ever had a tarot card reading. Oh, that's about 33%. So you know that when you draw the card like it is on your cover, that means one thing, right? Sometimes it comes out upside down. So reversed Fool card means that there's a bad decision that you've made, you're being indecisive, you have some apathy, you have some hesitation, or you're making a faulty choice. It can be a new beginning you're not thrilled about. And I know and love a lot of you here, and some of you have had to make transitions this year that you weren't real thrilled about. You had to move to a different place. You had to go through your stuff more quickly than you wanted to. You had to get rid of your stuff that meant something to you. And nobody was energized and enthusiastic about taking your collector plates because those millennials are not collecting stuff anymore. They're collecting experiences. How dare them? After we've collected all this cool stuff from their travels, and then they don't even want them. So a reverse card means hesitancy. So the lovely thing is most of you are not adept at tarot card readings in your life as the way to predict your every move. You have this order of service with the Fool, and if he's upside down, just turn him right side up. So easy, and you can shift your attitude. So I want to go over quickly some of the stages that happen in either the hero's journey or some of the places and the people that you meet as you're walking down the street each day in your neighborhood. So you meet the magician. This is the stage in the beginning when you're still excited about something and you're learning to use your motor skills in a new way. Again, we're not just talking about toddlers. If you learn a new instrument, you're learning to use your motor skills in a new way. Or if you're crafting something. Then you have the high priestess. You begin to have a desire to want to know more. When you draw the Empress, it influences and shows the influence of female role models and creative skills in your life. The Emperor has the influence of the father in discipline and structure. The Lovers, in that stage, is when you develop friendships. Sometimes they're romances, and you start to get a taste of your own independence and make your own choices. The Chariot phase is when we act on those choices and in those directions. So when we start using this model to understand ourselves, we can also start to understand the people in our family that are various ages. And so you think, why in the world? Just fill in the blank. You know somebody younger, and they are telling you about something and something and something they're doing. Why in the world would somebody post a picture of their goulash? Why in the world? Because they have been raised in times of technology. They have been raised in places where they know that their connections are going to require different kinds of connections. So why in the world is because why in their world, which was different than your world, would they be doing something? They're on a journey as well. They're just on that journey in a different place and time. So Don Bronzite simplifies this process for us. So think of your own life. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. In the beginning, you're set up as a hero or heroine of your story. Then something is thrown at you with such a great force that takes conflict for you to get through, and there's a whole heap of trouble. Does everybody have an example? I want you to raise your hand if you've ever lived through a whole heap of trouble. Okay, the rest of you that haven't, you still have time to create a whole heap of trouble. After you face those foes and the obstacles that come with that whole heap of trouble, the hero sometimes saves the day, not always by themselves, but you might save the day because you turned a decision around or you applied yourself differently, and you might have won the prize, of course, of the damsel in distress, or you might have won the prize of the job, or the goal of having harmony in your life, or finding the right career, or conquering a fear or disease that has minimalized your life. So these are the descriptions that come to our life for you and I when we can see our personal life is having similar adventures and struggles and outcomes that can be rewarding, because those rewards are often on the other side of conflict that isn't always as pleasant as we'd like. So depending on what stage you are, the examples will be different. A senior in high school has challenges and journeys, but their details of their journey is different than a senior who is in their 80s and giving up some of their independence along with car keys and changes that they didn't predict were going to happen so soon. All people have the capacity of going through a transformation of the spirit and the soul. You can deepen your story's interpretation and move it from the literal, or you can just stay in the literal. But what a non-adjective filled place that can be. So this process and journey is going to take you on out of the ordinary world onto a call of adventure. Sometimes you're going to refuse the call. What is your call about? Each of you has a different call. Some of you are artists. Some of you are musicians, engineers. Some of you aren't sure, and you say, I'm not sure, because you're refusing the call because you think it's good to be humble and think that I'm not really different than anybody else. Yes, you are. If you want to have a talk about that during the week, I can help tell you how you're different than other people. And within that difference, there's a gift. And then you go on and you meet the mentor. You can cross a threshold. There will be tests, there will be enemies, and there will be allies. And that is sometimes why we come to a UU church. We find our allies, that we no longer have to argue about the Trinity, and we don't have to argue about other things that start with T's. We just have to know that we have similar beliefs and ideologies, and so we can move those away and we can continue to approach our adventure, have the ordeal, get the rewards, and then come on the road back. You return with the elixir. Some of you are at that stage in your life that you get to return with the elixir. Bless you. That doesn't mean that you can't, after you get to the top of the mountain, are you going to leave all the rest of us down on the side of the mountain holding on for dear life with only one plastic water bottle left? Or are you going to reach down your hand and your wisdom and help us all get to the top of the mountain? So you address this, not just women to women or men to men or Unitarian Universalists to Unitarian Universalists. You are bold in sharing your wisdom, even if you get eye rolls from your relatives and younger friends. Just figure their eyes need exercise. Just let the eye rolls go, because there will be a time, and it's usually a time, when they hear the message from you, eye rolls, they read it, then they see it on a meme, I always get in trouble with that one, a meme, and then in 2 more years, their real life informs them of the very thing you tried to warn or tell them about 3 years ago, and it all comes together. And so your fool meets their fool. And you have the adventure and the courage of celebrating new beginnings on your journey, because you see how their journey is unfolding in a different place and time. So this little guy, he's from the Pueblo nations. And has anybody seen him before? Yeah. So his name is, Mike, have you seen him too? Oh. His name is Kashari. He's a Kashari clown. He's not the same as a fool, but he kind of fit into the general genre today. So a Kashari clown in the Pueblo First Nations would stand, for instance, behind me. And here I am thinking I'm all that in a bag of potatoes because I spent so much time researching about the Fool, and you all came and fed my ego and are paying attention for about another 3.5 minutes. And the Kashari would be back there going like this. So the Kashari shows up, and he stands behind the minister and the mayor, and he stands behind the CEO, and he makes these somewhat mocking gestures, but he's highly respected in the whole community because what he's doing is keeping the humility of those think that they're in leadership down, so that it is an organic process of gaining wisdom from each individual equally, and no one person being elevated to the top without question. And so he will show up. He'll show up even with the priest and the First Nations, and he'll show up at sacred ceremonies, and he will do things like that. And he's kind of on my shoulder like a Pueblo Indian Jiminy Cricket, keeping things humble. A friend of mine started a ministry in San Francisco, and this was about 30 years ago, and it was called the Faithful Fools. And she started the ministry for the homeless people in San Francisco. It was called the Tenderloin District because the prostitutes were so in such high numbers in that area, and that is how the economy kept going through the Tenderloin District. So on the tenderloins of the young women, the economy kept going within that homeless area. So she started a homeless ministry, and it was called the Faithful Fools, and it's still going. And she kind of adopted the Kashari idea. And so at the board meetings, and they had quite a large budget because it was supported by UU churches all over the United States, all the board members would wear those court gesture hats, or the hats that come from Nepal that look like court gesture hats. And that's what they would be required to wear at the board meeting. Because, of course, they were handling serious matters of consequence, but they needed to keep it in balance. And so we come full circle today, and we try to sing these beautiful hymns perfectly, right? And then sometimes we just have to laugh because we're not going to sing them perfectly. Because sometimes Diana's going to add the extra notes because she's reading a language that all of us don't understand, and we're rushing ahead. And so why not add a joyful laugh to it? So as you become a fool once again, and if somebody ever asks you, have you ever been a fool? Do you know a fool? Are you going to become a fool again? You can just say yes. So to April Fools in a different way, don't change the salt and the sugar. Do something that is less obtrusive. But walk into the beginning of spring like a fool, learning new instruments, hearing beautiful sounds, and respecting the mores of the culture that you have joined. So be it. So this is what I'm going to say about this, Diana. I have heard tell, I have actually watched live streams when I'm not giving the service, and you know what happens when the cat's away? You know who you are. So just remember, I'm still here today, even though I'm in the back of the room, and I'm going to ask you a question on your way out that you can refuse to answer or you can answer, and that is, when is the last time you were a fool? Thank you for our closing music.
Thank you.